Welcome to the Kim and Kat Talk Show!
Today's topic, political division.
Today we are going to be exploring some of the nation's most prominent crises and how they have contributed to intense division.
These crises have torn our nation apart from the very beginning, especially when it comes to politics. Let's start with an example. The issues involved with the ratification of the American Constitution in 1787 and 1788.
Differing opinions on how much power the new federal government should be allowed led to the birth of Federalists and Anti-Federalists.
Here to debate the issue, Federalist James Madison and Anti-Federalist Patrick Henry.
Mr. Madison, how do you feel about a central government?
A stronger central government is needed to maintain order and preserve the Union.
No! You are completely wrong, sir. A stronger central government would destroy the work of the revolution, limit democracy, and restrict states' rights.
But the Articles of Confederation were extremely weak. Under them, the government could not regulate trade or collect taxes to pay for the war debts. We need the change now!
But this proposed constitution does protect individual rights, and it gives more power to the central government than the British ever had.
Don't worry, we'll put it in the Bill of Rights after we ratify it. Just for you. You really should ratify it. Save our nation a lot of grief.
We fought too hard to gain our independence from the British monarchy just to be placed under similar control. Those Bill of Rights better have freedom and liberty written all over them.
As you can see, the crisis involved in getting the Constitution ratified created national division over the foundation of the United States government. Different states with representatives who took a stance on the issue were pitted against each other during this vulnerable time for the future world power.
Although the Constitution was eventually ratified, there was still controversy concerning how the federal government was to operate. This difference of opinion has divided our nation ever since.
Look at today's political parties. They still argue over how much power the federal government should have in relation to the state's government, among other issues involving how power is divided throughout the country.
Let's look at another example of national division in American history. During the late 1840s, there were intensified sectional feelings over how to deal with the new Western territories. Would they be slave states or free states when added to the Union?
At the time, there was a delicate balance of 15 free and 15 slave states. If the scale tipped to either side, that side would have an advantage in Congress. The sides pitted against each other were comprised of Free Soilers, who were Northern Democrats and Whigs, and Southern Democrats.
Here to share their views on the issue are representatives from each party and Northern Democrat Lewis Cass.
Mr. Whig, what is your position on whether or not slavery should be allowed in these new territories?
I support the Wilmot Proviso and the position that all blacks, slave and free, should be excluded from the next concession.
You're trying to destroy slavery completely, aren't you?
Never said that. I just want to keep the West a land of opportunity for whites, only so that the white majority won't have to compete with the labor of slaves or free blacks.
Any attempts to restrict the expansion of slavery is a violation of our constitutional right to take and use our property as we wish. I think we should extend the Missouri Compromise line of 3630 westward to the Pacific Ocean and permit territories north of that line to be non-slave.
Hold on, guys. I suggest that instead of Congress determining whether or not to allow slavery in a new Western territory or state, we all decide that the matter should be determined by a vote of the people who settle on the territory. I call it popular sovereignty.
What do you two think of this proposed compromise?
This popular sovereignty idea sounds like it could work. I mean, these states would most likely choose to have free soil anyway.
Oh no, they won't. Slavery has the upper hand here, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
As you can see, the views of the Free Soilers and Southern Democrats split the nation in half horizontally. Although the idea of popular sovereignty seemed plausible on paper, it turned out to be disastrous when applied to the Western Territory of Kansas.
The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 proposed that the settlers in both Nebraska Territory and Kansas Territory would be free to decide whether or not to allow slavery.
Passage of this act renewed controversy between the North and the South that had been partly resolved by the Compromise of 1850, which had settled the slavery question in the new Western Territories. In effect, it also repealed the Missouri Compromise that had forbade slavery above the horizontal 3630 line. These territories were above that line.
Northern Democrats condemned the laws as surrender to the slave power. Furthermore, a new political party known as the Republican Party emerged whose membership was entirely Northern and Western and whose purpose was to solely express opposition to the spread of slavery in territories.
Sounds like a pretty intense rivalry.
Yes, it was indeed, Kim. These political parties and their opposing views were contributed as some of the underlying causes for the Civil War.
Lastly, let's discuss one of the worst crises of our nation's history and how it too divided the U.S. politically. The Great Depression was the severe worldwide economic downturn in the 1930s.
Franklin D. Roosevelt campaigned for president in 1932, committed to action and willing to experiment with political solutions to economic problems, but without a detailed plan for ending the Depression.
He proposed the New Deal, whose programs were to serve 3 R's: relief for people out of work, recovery for business and the economy as a whole, and reform of American economic institutions.
The New Deal, though helpful with providing temporary relief, was not without its critics. Here to comment, Roosevelt's chief political advisor, Lewis Howe, and conservative Democrat and critic of the New Deal, Al Smith.
Mr. Howe, how do you think this New Deal will affect the country?
Well, Kim, I believe that the Financial and Industrial Recovery Program will provide greatly needed relief to individual workers and businesses. It will also put the countless unemployed back to work.
I have something to say. These New Deal programs of yours give the federal government way too much power, Mr. Howe.
What?
Relief programs like the Works Progress Administration and labor laws such as the Wagner Act border on socialism, even communism.
Excuse me, but the WPA, FYI, employed 3.4 million men and women who have formerly been on relief rolls of state and local governments. It paid them double the relief rate. Would you deny those 3.4 million a job and let their poor children starve to death?
Don't you try to make me feel bad. How did you get the money to pay these 3.4 million? The billions of dollars you're using is brewing up a huge pot of national debt. Good luck with paying that back in the midst of a depression.
How do you defend yourself, Mr. Howe?
Smith doesn't see how these programs are saving this nation. Any plan is going to have its downsides, but I truly believe Roosevelt is doing what's best for the nation through this New Deal. The people of this country were waiting for action. Roosevelt is doing exactly that, and his experimenting will lead to successful solutions.
Thank you for providing your insight on the New Deal, Mr. Howe.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
There you have it. The New Deal was Roosevelt's solution to the Great Depression, but the programs were very controversial. Not everybody thought it was truly helping the nation.
There were all sorts of critics, both liberal and conservative, and demagogues who played upon the American people's need for immediate solutions to their problems.
The Great Depression was a struggle for the nation. There's no doubt that the downward slide after the stock market crash hit everyone hard.
But due to the different levels that people were affected by it, there were several different solutions proposed and disagreement among political members.
So you see, division will inevitably accompany national crises because there will always be more than one way to deal with a problem.
Politics involves making decisions for the good of the nation, but when politicians disagree, that disagreement spreads through the citizens. Compromises are of course helpful when a resolution is needed, but they do not fully satisfy either side and never will.
In the past, as you saw in our 3 historical examples, our nation has seen pretty extreme division that has frequently been a challenge to the American experiment of democracy.
I really hope our nation can learn from history and strive to deal with crises in a more effective and less divisive way.
Me too. Well, that's all for us today. Thanks for tuning in to the Kim and Kat Talk Show. See you next time, cats!